Here's how a vending machine actually works. When you place a coin in the machine, light sensors determine the size and electromagnets detect the metal type to identify the coins, then sort them into columns. And if it's a fake, it goes into the reject chute. When it needs to give change, it releases one coin carefully at a time into the chute. When you press a key, a computer orders one of the 32 motors to turn the spiral 360 degrees. Then as the snack falls, it hits a line of 10 infrared beams. If nothing crosses the beams, then the computer orders the coils to turn another 360 degrees until something does. The most dangerous prisoner. In 2007, a lady living near a California state prison got home late and went straight to bed. She woke up at midnight to the sound of footsteps. She thought it was her roommate, so she went downstairs to greet him. Suddenly, she realizes it isn't him and is shocked to see the stranger, who is about 6'1", walking towards her, so she ran to hide. While she was hiding and trying not to make any noise, she could hear the man running around, moving her furniture and screaming in frustration because he couldn't find her. After a few hours, she slowly came out to grab her phone and called 911. She quietly told them what had happened and described the man who was in her house. The police told her to remain calm and return to the place where she was hiding, and they would send someone to her house as soon as possible. It turned out that the man was a convicted murderer who had escaped prison. Things you're doing wrong and didn't know. Deodorant should actually be applied at night and not in the morning. Since you produce less sweat at night, your armpits will be able to absorb more of the active ingredients, allowing it to work for approximately 24 hours. The correct way to peel a banana is to start from the bottom and not the top. Doing it this way, it's easier to peel, and it also helps you remove those white strips of banana that get stuck to it. You don't need to fill your entire toothbrush with toothpaste. Just covering a third of the toothbrush is plenty. If you want your sticky notes to stick properly, you should peel them from the sides. Finally, the right way to cover an ice cream container after opening it is by placing wax paper or plastic wrap against the surface of the ice cream before closing it, because doing this prevents it from losing its creaminess. This story sounds fake, but it's 100% real. In 2013, Jim Stouffer's mother passed away from Alzheimer's at the age of 74. Doctors told Jim that the disease mutated in a way that they had never seen before, and asked if he was willing to donate her body for brain research. Jim decided to donate it to the Biological Resource Center in Phoenix, which removes body parts for scientific research, then cremates the rest and returns the ashes to the family members. Jim received his mother's ashes, but without specifying what was done to her body. A year later, the center was raided by the FBI, after hearing accusations that they were selling the donated bodies for profit, and among them was Jim's mother, who was sold for $5,893. It turns out that the bodies were actually used for US military experiments, and according to investigations, Jim's mother's body was strapped to a chair that was then detonated by a bomb underneath it to understand the effects on a body when a vehicle is hit by an explosive device. Jim and others who were affected sued the center, and in 2019 they were awarded $58 million for the damage, with the center being no longer in operation. Scary experiments that could have ended the world. In 1970, the Soviet Union began digging a hole in Russia to try and drill into the Earth's crust to see what was underneath. But according to scientists, drilling this deep would dislodge so much rock so quickly that it would trigger systemic forces like never seen before. But after digging for 12 kilometers, they gave up due to high temperatures. In 1989, a Soviet defector informed the British embassy that the Soviet Union was preparing biological weapons, using deadly pathogenic microorganisms. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the weapons were never used, and if they had been, you might not be watching this, because they would have wiped out most of the world's population. And finally, it was said that when the Soviets were creating biological weapons to harm humans, Americans wanted to use fungi to damage crops with the intention of removing the food supply of the entire country. The problem is, if they did so, the fungus would have spread to not only the country but to the entire world. Why squeezing your pimples is a bad idea. Our body always tells us when something's wrong. That's why when the pores of our skin become clogged and infected with bacteria, we get a red, lumpy, pus-filled pimple. Trying to make it go away faster by popping it is a terrible idea. The pressure you apply by squeezing your pimple will force the pus outwards, tearing your skin, creating a new wound that can easily turn into a scar. You're also likely to worsen the wound by adding new bacteria from your hands, because at least 150 types of bacteria are on your hands even when you think they're clean. Another thing that could happen is if you don't remove the entire pimple and accidentally push some dirt inside it, you can get an even bigger pimple and increase the chances of it being infected. If you have lots of acne, it's better to go to a specialist who knows how to treat them, and if you only have a bit, just wait for it to go away on its own. Things your parents told you that are actually false. Number 1. Carrots help you see in the dark. Carrots are full of vitamin A, which helps maintain eyesight but won't give you night vision. Number 2. Fruit Loops have different flavors based on their color, but in reality all Fruit Loops taste the same. Number 3. Dropping a penny from the Empire State Building can kill someone that's standing below, but a penny can't get that much speed to do that. Number 4. All chocolate is bad for your health, but dark chocolate in small amounts can be beneficial for your health. Number 5. Oranges are always orange. Some oranges stay green to protect them from the sun. Number 6. The humps on camels store water. What they actually do is store fat. This boy lived in a bubble for 18 years. Jimmy Livingston was born with no immunity, so he had to be kept isolated. His parents made him a plastic bubble that he couldn't get out of, and they could only touch him with gloves. When he was 16, he was attracted to his neighbor Chloe, who he could see through his window. When his overprotected mom found out about this, she warned him that if he touched her, he would die. As the years went on, Jimmy and Chloe became friends. Until one day, Chloe gave him news that left him really sad. She would be leaving soon to marry her fiancé at Niagara Falls. Since Jimmy was in love with her, he decided to make a suit, so he could go outside and interrupt the wedding. A few days later, he arrived just in time to interrupt the wedding. Then he confessed his love for Chloe and got out of the suit and kissed her. His mother arrived just in time to see him and told everybody the truth. Jimmy was perfectly fine. She was just holding him captive to keep him away from the rest of the world. In the end, Jimmy forgives his mother and ends up marrying Chloe, a musical instrument that can be played without touching it. The theremin was invented by accident in 1920 by the Russian musician and scientist Leon Theremin. He was creating a device that could measure the density of gas, but realized what he made produced sound that changed according to your hand position. The instrument consists of a box with two metal antennas on the sides and oscillators that control the frequency and amplitude of sound. The electrical signals produced by the instrument are then sent to a loudspeaker. The first antenna is on the right, which controls the pitch. The closer you place your hand, the sharper the sound is. The farther you move your hand away from the antenna, the louder it will be. The theremin has been used several times to create themes for television shows and was played in the 70s by Jimmy Page, who's the founder of the Led Zeppelin band. Why making fun of this guy can get you life in prison. In Thailand, you can go to jail for 3 to 15 years if you defame, insult, threaten, or criticize the king of Thailand, his wife, and close relatives because it's illegal. The 3 to 15 years will be for each insult the person makes. Here are some examples. In 2007, a Swiss man got drunk in Thailand and spray-painted portraits of the king for fun. He was arrested and sentenced to 10 years in prison. In 2008, an Australian wrote a book about the scandalous romances of the Thai royal court and was arrested when they arrived at the Bangkok airport during a trip to the country, sentenced to 3 years in prison. In 2009, a Thai woman was arrested and sentenced to 15 years in prison after giving a speech where she mentioned the royal court and they found it offensive. Finally, in 2017, a 34-year-old man created 10 Facebook posts that were insulting to the royal family, and he was sentenced to 70 years in prison, giving him 7 years for each post. The 5 most funny design fails. This is an ad for the mattress, but the guy isn't even laying on it. In order to use these scissors, the instructions say to cut the cable with scissors. You would think the inside of the left one is blue and the inside of the right one is red, but it's actually the opposite. On the red one, you could see it says blue. This maze is called amazing, but it's not really amazing, because the only end and finish is right here. Now before I show you the craziest one, I found this app that lets you prank your friends and family by changing their text messages. Just press a button on my profile to get it. Finally, each animal says what to feed it to keep things separate. For example, the lion says feed me plastic and cans. But the thing is, those are terrible things to feed them and kids might actually think that's what they eat. Chilling facts about the Titanic that you didn't know. In 1912, on April 14th at 11:40 p.m., the Titanic hit an iceberg causing damage to the ship, and after a couple hours it broke in two and sank completely. While the ship was sinking, the crew sent emergency signals that were picked up by 2 ships. The SS Californian, which was the closest to the Titanic, and the RMS Carpathia, which was farther away. The Carpathia was the one that came and saved the passengers who survived the sinking. But if the Californian had responded to the emergency call, it could have saved more lives or even all of them. The Titanic had the capacity for 64 lifeboats, but in the end, only 20 boats were used. The actual number of people who passed away is unknown, but it's estimated that there was around 1,518 people. The names of all the passengers are also unknown. In the investigations, they found out that lots of them were traveling under false names, which is why some of the tombstones have no names. Amazing treasures that were found by accident. In 2006, a fisherman got his anchor stuck on a giant clam and soon realized there was a large pearl inside of it. 10 years later, he gave it to his aunt, who gave it to the mayor to show off at a museum. They then realized how valuable the pearl was, because the pearl weighed 34 kilograms and was 30 centimeters wide by 67 centimeters long, with a value estimated to be around $100 million. The crater of diamonds is located in Arkansas and is open to the public so they can go and find their own diamonds. In 1924, W.O. Basham was lucky enough to find an 8-gram diamond, which became the largest ever found in the United States, and in 1971 it was sold for $880,000. According to an urban legend, Atari threw out a bunch of its systems into a garbage dump. So Joe Lewandowski, the owner of the garbage company, found records of where the garbage went and invested $50,000 into a search. It turns out that the legend was real and he was able to sell them all over the world for almost $108,000. Unsolved mysteries that have footage. On March 31st, 2006, medical student Brian Schaffer disappeared in the middle of the night when he was with his friends at a bar named Ugly Tuna. That was the last time he was ever seen, and the bar's surveillance camera served as evidence. It shows Brian talking outside the bar before going back inside, but he was never seen leaving. Detectives found no trace of Brian, nor did any other surveillance cameras around the site. Some people say the cameras weren't working or they were manipulated, but so far nobody knows anything. On March 18th, 2009, Claudia Lawrence had a phone call with her mother, and that was the last time they spoke. The next day, she didn't arrive at work and no one heard from her since. The police discovered that only her purse, phone, and chef's uniform were missing from her house, so they thought she went to work like usual. Surveillance camera footage from the street next to her house shows a suspicious man dressed in black walking around her house around 7:15 p.m. He then disappeared, then a minute later reappears with a bag, then stops walking when he notices someone, then continues walking after they leave. But no one knows if he had anything to do with her disappearance. Here's how to become the world's first trillionaire. The competition to be the richest person in the world right now has been in between Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. But this could change in the future because of an industry that hasn't yet been started, which is asteroid mining. Gold, silver, palladium, platinum, and much more can be extracted from asteroids between Mars and Jupiter. For example, the asteroid 16 Psyche has enough supply of ferronickel for the whole world to last for millions of years. The person who starts this industry will make money like never seen before without even traveling that far, because there's valuable asteroids close to Earth, like the 162,173 Ryugu, which is estimated at $83 billion. So far, no one's been able to pull it off because taking things to space is really expensive. And the most important question is, how are they going to extract the metals from the asteroids? Here's what would happen if you fell off a cruise ship. In 2018, a British lady was on the Norwegian Star cruise ship when she suddenly fell off the back. As soon as the crew found out about this, they started a search and rescue for her. They also called the authorities, who sent water patrol, an aircraft, and 2 rescue boats to find her. After 10 hours, they managed to find her and quickly took her to the hospital. The chances of survival are slim, but she has several things in her favor. Because she worked as a flight attendant, so she probably knew what to do in this situation. Even though these accidents aren't very common, they have emergency protocols in place. If there's an eyewitness who can report what happened, the crew notifies the captain, who usually stops the ship and backs it up. The authorities and the Coast Guard are then notified, while the crew searches for the spot where the person fell off. If you ever fall overboard, it's important to stay calm, try to stay where you fell, don't drink seawater, and keep your clothes on. Chilling last photos before they went missing. Andrew Macaulay's last photo was a self-portrait taken while he was alone in his kayak in the middle of the ocean. At the age of 39, he set out on a journey to be the first person to kayak from Australia to New Zealand. Unfortunately, even though he prepared for 10 years, he was unable to make it. His kayak and camera were found, but there was no trace of him. He was most likely capsized from a wave separating him from his kayak and ended up dying from hypothermia in the middle of the ocean. Chris Creamers and Lisanne Froon. In this photo, they're both smiling at the camera, with the mountains of El Pionista Trail in the background. On April 1st, 2014, they were preparing to go on the trail. After the trail, the family that was hosting was concerned because they hadn't returned, so they looked around but they couldn't find them. Days later, on the same trail, they found parts of their decomposed bodies. They think they had a fatal accident, but to this day their deaths remain a mystery. 5 photos you'll have to look at twice. At first it looks like one of the thumbs from Spy Kids, but it's actually just a sausage hanging from string in front of a man. At first it looks like this bartender's wearing a dress, but it's actually just a giant mirror on the counter showing the customer. At first it looks like this rock is floating in the air, but it's actually in water and the sky's just reflecting off of it. At first it looks like this guy's a giant on the beach, but he's actually just balancing on a tightrope. Now before I show you the craziest one, I found this app that makes your Snapchat score look like this and your Snap score look like this. Just press the button on my profile to get it. Finally, at first this just looks like a brick wall, but if you look close enough in the middle, you can see a cigar. Now comment below if you've seen the Star Wars character that I hid in the video. 5 Disney secrets you didn't know. If you look closely, some scenes from different Disney movies are quite similar. This is because the drawings were made by hand, and the animators only make a few changes to create a new scene. Lilo's voice belongs to the actress who played the role of Samara Morgan in the movie The Ring. Since Walt Disney wanted to spend most of his free time at Disneyland, he created a secret apartment on the 2nd floor of the fire station on Main Street, located on the famous avenue that leads to the park's Central Plaza. The name of the wizard in the movie Fantasia is Yensen, which is Disney in reverse. Simba means lion in the Swahili language, and Boo's real name is Mary because the person who plays her is called Mary Gibbs. Finally, Walt ordered to build a bunch of tunnels underneath the park to allow the actors to get from place to place without the public noticing, so they wouldn't lose the magic of the place. Sneaky ways airports get you to spend more money. The first thing they do is put the parking ticket at a high price. It's cheaper if you park at a nearby hotel or get a ride by a bus or cab. They also ask you to arrive early to avoid missing your flight. So after checking in and going through security, you'll feel relieved and ready to wait for more. And you'll also have plenty of free time to shop. Airports take advantage of this by placing lots of stores in your way, like coffee shops, convenience stores, and restaurants. Most commonly, more stores will be on your right, because most people are right-handed and they tend to look that way more often. Finally, you'll find eye-catching and spacious stores to attract your attention, so you can walk right through with your luggage, while restaurants and cafes will have a quiet atmosphere to make you feel more comfortable and spend more money. The school bus that mysteriously disappeared. In 1976 in Chowchilla, California, 26 children between the ages of 5 and 14 were on their way home on the school bus when they were kidnapped along with the driver. Frederick Newhall Woods and brothers James and Richard Schoenfeld came up with an evil plan because they didn't have much money. The school bus left at the same usual time, but on the way, a van pulled up in front of them, and inside were the 3 men with masks and guns. Once they got control of the bus, they drove for about 12 hours to a quarry 100 miles from Chowchilla. When they arrived, the kidnappers took out the hostages one by one, and told them to climb down a ladder that apparently led to a buried trailer. They didn't have good ventilation, so they were suffocating. And after 16 hours, the bus driver and the older boys piled up mattresses to get to the only place out, then moved a metal lid the kidnappers had placed and dug to the surface, managing to get out from underground. When they got to the surface, the 3 men were sleeping, so it was an easy escape. And 2 weeks after the kidnapping, the 3 men were arrested. This man has the longest nails in the world. Sridhar Shalal stopped cutting the nails on his left hand in 1952 when he was just 14 years old. His longest nail was on his thumb, measuring 197.8 centimeters long. In 2014, he got a Guinness World Record for having the longest nails in history on a single hand, with a total length